Alright, we have to talk about how to find the right balance between your spiritual life and your material life, making money, business. And I want to make this point very, very clear because it is a trap that I see a lot of people fall into. I fell into it myself in the past, and based on some of the things that I've been covering on this channel and the way I explain them, I'm worried some viewers might make a massive mistake that has to do with this. Because the mistake that a lot of people do, and I've done myself, is to neglect the material in search of the spiritual. Because very often what happens is that when you make money for the first time, and not just for the first time, but when you've been making money for a while, okay? I'm not just talking about being a new rich. Once you've been doing well for a while, you have the classic realization of, oh, okay, it's not all about money, right? You have to get the car first to realize that the car is not that big of a deal, even though it's nice, but it's not as big of a deal as you originally imagined. And you stop caring so much about money, you're not so emotionally invested into it. Also, maybe you start meeting some millionaires who are actually sad and they're depressed, or they're living like these miserable lives, or even worse things. I've actually met a handful of those, and what this can lead to, your own experience and then meeting these kind of people, is this aversion to the material things in life and to renounce your material goal. As a side note, I would say that some people reach the same conclusion without them making money and without personally meeting these guys, but honestly I would say that's a subtle cop-out, because what you're actually doing is just you're checking out of the game even before you try, so that you cannot fail. And what you're doing is you're putting yourself on a moral high ground as if you're above all of these material things, and you're like, oh no, this is just stupid, I don't need money is meaningless, and I don't even want to try because why bother, there's no point in it. But in reality, 99% of people who make these kind of comments and they check out of the game even before they try, it's just some mental gymnastics that they do because in reality they're scared of losing and not achieving things and realizing that maybe they're a failure or that they're not as good as other people, or to realize that you cannot truly make it, right? Because you have this image of yourself of someone that's amazing and super good and all that, but if you go and try and now you fail, you'll have these two versions of reality that will crash with each other. Your mental image of who you are, but then the reality of who you truly are in the real world. And if those images do not match, you're gonna crash emotionally and it's gonna hurt a lot. So instead, you just do all of these mental gymnastics so that you don't even participate, so that this crash does not happen and you can preserve this positive image that you have of yourself. There's a very interesting book that's called The Folly of Fools that I would recommend you to at least skim through it. And it basically talks about how the brain is capable of fooling itself, right? Which is a phenomenon that's very fascinating, right? How could it be that this thing, that's the brain, within its own system, can create a lie and then believe this lie? How is it possible if the lie originated from yourself? But that is extremely common. We all do it. It happens almost every single day, and this is what the book is about. But anyways, that was just a side note. And also the brain sometimes it does this whole mental gymnastics thing just for energy preservation, which leads to stagnation, and it basically ruins your life long term. Now, regardless of how you got into this conclusion that, oh, okay, the material is not as important and I should focus more on the spiritual, even if it's from first hand or because you've lied to yourself and you've done all these mental gymnastics and now you believe you're above everything and you're like, oh no, let me go meditate. Regardless of how you got here, the reality is that you have to stop looking at it from the extremes, because on one end we have the extreme of what a lot of people perceive nowadays, which are these sort of millionaires, the sad moppy millionaire that he only knows how to make money and how to run a business. Meanwhile, he's neglecting his family, he's neglecting his health, his spiritual life, his friends, he's lonely, depressed, all of that stuff, which a lot of people believe those are the majority of millionaires, but that's not true. Honestly, in my life, most of the rich people that I've met, they're very happy. Okay, so I don't know where this notion comes from, but that's a topic for a different day. Then we have the other extreme of the argument, which are just like these hippies who are focusing so much on the bigger picture that they cannot even afford to pay rent or even to pay for a drink. All right, as always in this channel, the thing that I'm always talking about is the middle ground. You need both, and this is actually what the Buddha says. This is what the Buddha calls the middle path or the middle way. So basically, strive for these materialistic goals while realizing the bigger picture of life. These things are not mutually exclusive. And here's the thing, like, being spiritual doesn't mean that you're this chill dude that does nothing. You can be very spiritual and at the same time be very ambitious and action oriented. Both things can coexist. The way I see spirituality within this context, okay, there's a lot of different ways in which we can analyze spirituality, but within the thing that we're talking about right now, the way I see it and the right approach is basically detachment. But detachment from the results. You still have to try and want it to come to fruition, whatever it is that you're after, but it's more about the process and just trying and playing the game. That's what it's all about. For example, with this YouTube channel, I would love for this YouTube channel to grow and have a massive community and do a lot of cool things that I'm planning on doing. But if it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, well, it's all right, because what I'm enjoying is just the process of it, working on it, working really long hours on this whole thing, and just trying to put together all of these ideas that I have on my head. That is what's very fulfilling, you know, the experience, the things that I'm learning. Honestly, it's very interesting both when things work and they do not work, because there's always something that you can learn from it. It's more about, in a way, who you become. And this is something that Jim Rohn used to say. He had a quote along the lines of, you should become a millionaire, not just for the fact that you'll have $1 million, even though, yeah, for sure, go make it, but more for what it will make of you. What kind of person will you turn into as you go through the path of trying to make $1 million? And then he even said, like, yeah, once you make it, you can just give it away, because then you can make it all over again. But don't get it twisted. This does not mean that money does not matter. No, money matters a lot, right? But it's just something that I see a lot of people, they struggle with, right? Because I'm talking about these things and detachment and not caring about results, and it's like, no, it's this fine line in the middle. Like, yeah, results matter and money matters and all of that, but it's just like the way you approach it. It's from the standpoint of not being so emotionally invested into it, from the stance that a lot of people take of these extremes. We live in a material world that is ruled by a financial system. So money is one of the things that matters the most at the top of the hierarchy. Now, I know what the argument that a lot of people give, which is like, oh, well, but then you're a slave to the system, right? And you want to break free from the system, and it is not the way to live. But if that's what you believe, I can also make the argument of like, okay, then stop eating or stop breathing. To what you might respond like, oh, but that is a natural function of reality and nature. But what makes you think that a financial system that comes from society, this is where it originates, which society has emerged from human behavior, which it's rooted in a lot of things, but one of them is genetics. So if you start to follow this chain the other way around, you can see how everything is connected. And you could come to the argument that the financial system, it is completely natural. It is a part of nature. In the same way that you have wolf packs, right? And a wolf is born, and it's born into a family and a pack, and then there's a way in which they move together, they put themselves in different positions within the hierarchy, and this is how they hunt, this is how they reproduce, this is how they communicate, and how they do everything. We humans, it's kind of like the same thing, but with more steps, right? We have more complexity to the whole system, which leads to these sort of things like the financial system. But in the same way that we look at a wolf pack and we're like, oh yeah, all of this behavior and all of these things that are doing, they're completely natural. Well, what makes you think we cannot reach the exact same conclusion? Now, going back to the topic, I do not know why, but sometimes people think that being spiritual is doing nothing and just resting on your laurels. But no, if you have a talent, if you have a skill that you can use to make something in this world, go use it, because that's how you actually feed your soul. Yes, sometimes the soul needs to be fed by inaction, you know, doing nothing, by reflection, by meditation, but other times, very often, and I would say this is what most people need nowadays, is to feed their soul through experiences, through taking risks, through taking action, through creation. There's a time for growth in life and there's a time for reflection. You know, just like the seasons. We have 4 seasons in a year for a reason. But it seems like in life, some people just want to live in like spring 24/7. So you have to balance it out, okay? I hope I made myself very clear with all the points, because these topics are very tricky to explain, because as soon as you leave out one single argument, people can go into a tangent that then they're like, oh no, but this invalidates everything. And it's like, it's very difficult, because at the end of the day, it's all semantics, right? What exactly does it mean to be spiritual? You can have 100 different definitions of spirituality or success or money or focus, meditation, fooling yourself. Like, this is the problem with speaking about these things, that I'm throwing these words around, but to some other people, they might mean different things. And that's actually where most arguments lie in. Regardless, I hope this was helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you like my videos, go check some of my other videos. Maybe you're gonna love this one right here. So go watch that one. But for now, that is it. And hopefully I will see you on the next video. Take care. Peace.